Presenter is Birgit Behr, and she's Chief Corrosion Engineer with European Energy. And her presentation is entitled, How do you take sustainability into account during design? So a little bit about Behr. She's, as I said, Chief Corrosion Engineer for European Energy, who develop, construct and operate renewable energy, across solar, on and offshore wind and power. She holds a BSc in Chemical Engineering and is an AMP certified cathodic protection CP4 specialist, which Stuart will be very happy about. And specialized in cathodic protection design and retrofits, corrosion monitoring, corrosion protection strategies for steel and reinforced concrete structures, and with a green heart. Bert is chairing the Danish Mirror Committee for ISO TC35 organic coatings, TC107 inorganic coating and metallization, and TC156 cathodic protection. Work experience for 35 years, covers consultancy in is that COWI? C-O-W-I, yeah.
Yes.
Including a secondment to Ministry of Works in Bahrain, Ørsted for the past 9 years, where Birgit was responsible for the offshore wind corrosion protection design. So please welcome Birgit.
Thank you very much. So how do you take sustainability into account during design is the title of my presentation. Now, what I would normally do is to take the highlights in case I get in trouble on the timings. I have already shared with you what I intend to say. And let me see, this is the one, right? Yeah, you can also see it up there. Good. So, I mean, text from the presentation, we as engineers, we do know to which extent designs can be made environmental friendly, because we know the functional requirements that needs to be met. We also know the durability that needs to be met. And that means that we know to which extent you can actually challenge a design of a system. This cannot be done by scientists by themselves. So I think that's very important, and I think we need to get more into the game on this. In order to get to a more sustainable future, oh, that's the wrong one, sorry. In order to get to a more sustainable future, we all need to work together. Us as engineers, the scientists, all the standards where most of the regulations, they get inspiration from, and the regulators. So we need to do that as a whole in order to push the limits, but also to speed up the process. We all need to stay sharp. I think we got a very good impression from the two previous speakers on what is sustainability. So we do something, we take the CO2, we put it in the ground. Okay, we still get the heat developed anyway. So, and maybe the main problem is that we are now 8 billion people around. So use less would be a good suggestion. So stay sharp, and this is just a plastic bag that my daughter got a new t-shirt in, and it's don't judge me, I'm biodegradable, then all is good. But limit resource use. And that's the last thing here. The take is, if you reduce quantity of materials, you get a very big step ahead. So going back to the agenda, you have already seen the takes. I'll just share with you who European Energy are, because maybe you don't know. I also have a company presentation that I will share upstairs, so I'll try and limit it here. I'll also say, why is this conference relevant? Because it is. Then I've done a calculation example on if you can optimize and calculate how can you reduce metal emission, for instance, to the sea from offshore wind use. Then I have, because there are so much build out in the offshore wind industry across Europe, across the world, and what are the requirements that we should put forward, linking it to environmental impact and sustainability. And I'll share with you what the Danish government has decided, which will be up for debate, what are the ambition level on this? And they have high ambition level, I'm glad to say. Then a few words on standardization and the engineering and regulators. How does it work? Text from the presentation, if we don't make that last slide, will be fine. You have just presented who I am, so I don't need to say that. I would say, however, why am I here? Doing engineering work, etc. But I have worked on renewable energy projects for more than the last 10 years with Ørsted on offshore wind, and now also with European Energy. But also before that, as a consultant, I was project managing a project for the Nordic countries' road directorates. So that's on the construction side of things. So that was a Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, Finnish road directorate, where we did a life cycle optimization project. In that project, we also developed a life cycle assessment tool, which has now been updated and implemented by the Danish road authorities. They are not there where they put requirements to actually values, but we are starting to get the declarations on where we should focus, where are the bigger impacts. So that's part of why I'm here. I was traveling with my family some weeks ago. We were going to Jutland, different part of Denmark, and I said, we need to pull over on one of these rapeseed fields, because when I grew up, they were there, always very beautiful. Today we think about Ukraine when we see the colors, but it's also fuels which is used as biofuels, all these rapeseeds, and then you have for use for food, for animals, etc. And I said, I would like for you to take a picture of me next to this, because then people might think that I'm an influencer. And when we pulled over, there was another car in front of us with a group of young men. And they said, what are you doing? I'm just having my photo over here. I can join you. So I have to say, I have no idea. Oh, that's the wrong way. Yeah. So I have absolutely no idea on who this young man is. But you can see he's holding a beer can. And when we took these pictures, his friends drove off and left him there. They did come back. But this is a part of what is sustainability. Now we use a lot of agricultural land to feed into what is more sustainable fuel in the bio plants. So European Energy, and you can look at the presentation later. We are developing, we are constructing, we are divesting, we have energy power purchase agreements, and it's all across renewable lines. We are, I mean, they're rapidly growing. We are rapidly growing. We have 25 to 50 more people starting every month. So we are 650 now, maybe, and it's just over a year. It's been doubling up. So this is a booming industry. And as you see, we are, Europe is only part of it, but we are also looking into other continents. So we do onshore wind, we do offshore wind, we do solar projects, we do power to X, and obviously we look into battery solutions to see what can be done on that side. I took a picture of one solar farm. This is a fairly big one, 304 megawatts. And you say, do you like to have this view? We saw an example on, and this is where we need to change our mindsets because we've had many debates in Denmark. Then people say, oh, no solar panels where I'm living. I think we should do renewable, but not right here. Same goes for if you have a summer house near the coast. I suggest we all just start liking this view because it's part of the future. And obviously you don't put it in nature reserves. And many of these solar farms, they are places where you can't do agriculture. And also we are developing coexistence between agriculture and solar panel. And trust me, in the south of Europe, it's a good idea because the crops are being burned off because it's too warm and dry. Actually, your panels is a good adaptation to that. So coexistence is also a key word. If you say average for how much energy consumption do a family of 4 use, it might be 4 kilowatts a year. So a solar farm like this would be able to supply energy for around 75,000 people. It's a fairly good chunk, fairly good amount, and that would then be 300,000 individuals if you calculate it that way. I have some brochures on how we look into ESG. We get more and more people within the organization looking into this. It's by regulations. We need to look into where do we get our supply from. We had an incident last year where, as you may know, the majority of solar panels are produced in China. There's no way out of buying things in China. They have the materials and a lot of things. But the sub-supplier and their sub-supplier and their sub-supplier, you need to be on top of who is buying from whom, that you don't all of a sudden have child labor somewhere or slave-like conditions. Because we can sit here in the Nordic countries, we do renewable energy, but we have to think what we are doing to the others. So we have to be behaving in a good way. So a lot of people working on that to make sure that we don't have social dumping, etc. It's a Danish term. I don't know if you have the same in England. And then now comes the funny part, because I know that many people are not completely on top of what is power to X, and I don't know if you talk about it to the same extent as we do in Denmark. We tried this this morning, so let's see. I have a small video which is showing power to X, and let me just see if I can get it to work. And you can here see the principles of how it works. So you have energy being produced offshore or on land, solar production, and then you get the electrolysis done from this. And then you have your hydrogen source there, and it's being used by who wants to use it. It's a lot of people. And then you can balance the grid. We talked about that a little earlier, so that you can actually adjust. If you can't make the users of energy use energy at the right time, trust me, we adjust that with prices in Denmark, so you don't use too much energy in the evening. And then if you supplement it with CO2, you produce methanol, and we have an agreement with Maersk and Lego and a lot of companies who from these plants will take out this so they actually become sustainable. When I was at the Danish airport, I can also see that it's only a question of time before the airplanes will be fueled with e-methanol going forward. They were a bit optimistic, I think, because now we know where do we get the CO2 from, but they say we get it from the production or taken from the air, and I thought now we are becoming ambitious, but that's that was in the Danish airport. Let me see if I can get out of this again. Yes. So what are there any concerns here? Yes. Which water source do you use to use in your electrolysis? On our plants, it's locally pumped water. So it's not tap water, it's locally pumped water. Of course, the ambition going forward, if you want to do power to X installations, which will be there in the upcoming energy islands, then you'd like to use seawater. So that's a developing area. Where we have both solar and wind, and often the sun doesn't shine when the wind is blowing and opposite. So it's actually balancing some of that grid. But when we don't, and then we have the CO2 from bioplants, so we place all in the same vicinity, so you don't need transport. Obviously, when you have the e-methanol, you need to transport it to the users. There is an infrastructure, gas infrastructure being built in Denmark. And of course, the ambition is also to use this infrastructure for these types of products. We call it e-methanol, and I think the E stands for ecological. Because if you want to do e-methanol and you want to have the sustainability mark, it has to be CO2 produced environmentally friendly or using rapeseed or whatever, instead of using what you already have, and we have abundant of CO2, but that's not permitted. Oh, that was me doing something. That's not permitted. It has to be from a renewable source to call it e-methanol. Then we have a big challenge, which is the efficiency of these systems. I mean, they have been known since the 20th in the last century, so 100 years. The efficiency is not so good, so you lose a lot of energy by doing this. Obviously, you can use the heat, and it is connected to the district heating system, so you use that. We had the Paris Agreement, which was 1.5 degrees, and we all already saw that that would be a challenge. Now we are at 2.8, and that's not good. With 2.8, we may lose Holland in 2100, unless a fast change is adapted soon. And we can laugh, okay, Holland, but trust me, part of Denmark is also quite lowland. So it's time to act, and I think also the governments know this. I've included, well, I don't know why it splits the words here. Already this June, we had a forecast which is 4 degrees higher than it was in average over the last many years. So it's really, really warm seasons, and I think you'll experience that in the UK as well. And what we, on our person, we experience the heat and the draft, rising levels. But what is really suffering the most is all the biodiversity. When I was with Ørsted, we did a project to see if we can actually have coral growing on offshore foundation structures, and there is an awesome project in Taiwan on that. It's officially published, etc. Corals are dying. I mean, this is what we live from. That's what comes from the land and the sea. So it's energy, yes, let's get that under control, but we need to look at what we're doing to the biodiversity as well. So lucky enough, our different governments are now getting up to speed. I have here the build-out, which is what was end of 2021, and the 2030 ambition. There are ambitions also for 2050, but this is by country, the square kilometers in the exclusive economic zone, and this is the build-out by 2021. And you can see, UK, you are the good guys, followed by China, who has far more waters to do something from, and Germany, Netherlands, Denmark, etc. Japan, they don't have a whole lot, but they have very deep waters, so there's also a technology that needs to be in place with all the floating structures, etc. So the 2030 ambition is really scaling up all of this, and that's good for all of us that we now get some dedicated ambitions. Now, all the countries, and I've seen also from Germany, etc., they now talk about how should we use the waters and for what. Because all the nature preservation, that's the first, right? That you need to have that in place. You can't do wind farms there, that would be wrong. And then if you look at this, you can see all the small blue dots. That's where we have existing wind farms offshore in Denmark. Then you look at the orange and the yellow, that's where there will be planning to do offshore wind build-out in the coming years. It's huge compared to what we already have. So 10 minutes, I'm running out of time, I knew it. And this is areas for carbon capture. And that's probably a place where we had oil and gas fields could be linked. Now I'll try to speed up a little because 10 minutes is not a long time. I did an example for 100 foundations, 8 megawatts, some water depths, etc. All the details you can read later. Say how many galvanic anodes, what's the quantities we are talking about for this. I used different scenarios. I said if we design using the old DNV, RPB401 for the current density, etc., using that with the composition from DNV, using it with the composition or the low zinc aluminum alloy composition that we are now introducing in the ISO 9351, which we agreed at an ISO meeting on Thursday to put out in this, so it's getting out in a public form soon. So using these and the new standards, you can read the details on this because I have other parts in the presentation that I would like to share. So you can say 810 tons of metal you can reduce to 450. And this is already optimizing design with the insert diameter and long slender anodes, etc., compared to small chunky ones. But you can almost reduce it to half by adapting the right method. And then you can say this one, I didn't put in a number, but I'm quite confident that we use more power than we need to. So save that and save it on the metal emission. So you had the result on this one, and that's what we often see on galvanic anodes. There's a lot of focus from a lot of regulatories on the metal emission. And often it's compared to that if you use impressed current, the metal emission is much less. Well, if you ask me, we are now comparing apple and pears. And it's important what we are emitting, and we should by all means reducing, but it's also to do with what are we actually emitting, which metals, in which concentration, and what's the toxicity of these. So if we combine a local impact with a holistic view, that's where we should be going, not only looking at our local sea, because the rainforest is extremely important to all of us. So we need to, for instance, the rainforest, it could be where are we mining, etc. So we need to take a more holistic approach. Win will come with a presentation later with some details on what we did in the new ISO 9351, also how we are looking at environmental impact. Basically, you can use environmental declarations so that you compare different impact categories, and that's important. We talk about CO2 all the time, and I know why. It's because it's easy to communicate one parameter. We need to learn to communicate on a more balanced view, taking more impact parameters in place, because it's also to do with acidifications, etc. And that's where the impact categories are important. Impressed current systems, so maybe not so much metal, but then you have some gas being developed, chlorine gases to a large extent. Is that worse? I don't know, but that's also affecting the sea environment, and you need to be able to know both and the impacts. And that's why the impact parameters are important, so you know, okay, what is the important impact parameter for this, and what about the other one? So it's not one over the other. In the Danish, I know this is in Danish because it's an agreement that came out late May on the build out of the first 6 gigawatt and energy islands. And I think this is important to show you. The Danish government, signed by all parties, have agreed that they should do third-party environmental declarations. Now this is becoming quite ambitious. Also that we had third-party life cycle assessments for all major components in an offshore wind farm. Okay, the anodes are not there, the coating systems are not there, but they are a very important part of it because any corrosion protection measure influences the amount of steel you use. If you start corroding and you have a dynamic structure, you need tons and tons of steel, not to name the acid integrity as itself. All the blades shall be reusable, and I'm looking forward to a talk on blades. One of you in the audience had a talk on that, because we talk about reusable, we talk about PFAS in Denmark, too high level in the sea. So how is that adopted? And now I have 5 minutes, don't be sorry. I'll manage the 5 minutes. This is why I put the conclusion at first. Also, you need to do monitoring, that's a lot with birds, etc. And you need to include nature inclusive design. And obviously, we already spoiled the sea many places by the trawling, etc. Now we need to put it onto new developers to also put nature inclusive design. We want some of the fish back. And of course, social clauses, social dumping, how is labor being made, etc. So this is all part of it. It's very ambitious and it needs to be implemented. The Danish mirror committees for the coding and the cathodic protection, we have been invited to enter into a dialogue with the Energy Agency who puts forward these requirements formally. So we'll do that over the autumn before this is put out in tender. And I'm really happy that they have invited us to join this dialogue because it's important. Again, we as engineers would know how this can be done, and they are happy to enter into a dialogue with us. I think this, Winston will cover a lot of this about how we included the UN Sustainability Goal in the new ISO 9351. You just need to speak faster. And then you can say ISO, actually when you make new work item proposals, they ask you to tick off which of the goals you will be addressing. So we have to do it in upcoming standards. We are working to get an upcoming standard, working on a new work item on coding for offshore wind structures. I'm working together with, of course, European Energy, Ørsted, Vestas, Vattenfall, Siemens, and we agree that this is a very good idea. So we are preparing this. You'll see it a little later in the year. Wind will cover a lot of this. Just stating that we have actually managed to work, producers, developers, creating an environmental impact annex on what can you do as a designer, what can you do to optimize, what can you do on the alloy composition, and also saying that we suggest or recommend that you do environmental product declaration. Now it also comes from the Danish government, so how lucky are we? But I see that it's, we are moving in the right direction in this. And the sustainability expert from Danish Standards saying, this is a very good document, and he has unofficially shared it with a lot of other committees saying, this is a way it can be done to include it in these standards. Because we sometimes tend to say, but this is outside our area, we are engineers, we are not. But it is doable. See, I made it. But yeah, you have heard all of this. So thank you very much. I think the last one's probably just